Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The girl tried to tear herself apart on two fronts, but what came of it? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy it! Psychiatrists tell us that anger and hatred are destructive feelings that we need to get rid of in order to be emotionally healthy. Maybe so, but how to get rid of righteous anger and hatred? It was a question I needed to answer, and years of therapy weren't helping me. Fate intervened. My name is Alan Easton. I was a fairly average guy at a large school I attended in a mid-sized city in the US. Although many girls in high school told me that I was really cute, and really cute I was shy and didn't go on dates very often. I was on the football team, and while I had the size, strength, and speed needed to be a starting linebacker, I lacked the dedication or sneaky play required, so I didn't play that much. My football coach was annoyed that he could never get the best out of me and kept teasing me, "You're too easygoing, Easton." My grades were always decent, but as with football, I wasn't as dedicated to my studies, so I wasn't an academic star. However, I did much better on standardized tests than my grades would have predicted. This only led to my teachers wondering why I wasn't doing better. "You're too lethargic," was the usual refrain from my physics teacher. My mother died before I was a teenager, but my older sister Carrie was a strong feminine influence, and my father was a great father, so I had a good family life. Despite the fact that Carrie was only of average height for a woman, if stamina had been bulky, she would have weighed 200 kilograms. Nothing frightened her, and nothing frightens her. My father was a partial owner of a car dealership and worked as a service manager, so we were always in decent financial shape. Like most of the kids in my class, I planned to go to college after graduating from high school. However, upon graduation, my plans changed when Janet Hetfield either blindsided me or got her claws into me, depending on how you looked at her. Janet was the most beautiful girl, although her dress and hairstyle were usually provocative. She had a God-given look that would make any man's mouth water. While the rest of her family could rightfully be called trailer trash, she apparently rose above her surroundings and somehow managed to dress and speak decently without coming across as a hillbilly or an idiot. In fact, although she was not academic, she was very intelligent and also manipulative. She was resourceful and purposeful. Although Janet had always been pleasant to me since I first met her, I had never considered her approachable, and I had never noticed her interest in me. This changed immediately after leaving school when she became very attentive. At first, I was taken aback by her obvious pursuit of me. After a couple of double dates to the movies, and after going dancing and outdoors together, she became really attached to me. Janet casually inquired about my sister's and father's schedules. When she learned that my sister was away at college and my father was working until 6:30 p.m., she asked to come over to my house. One Wednesday, 15 minutes after we entered my house, we made love. That day, I learned what Janet's most outstanding quality was. Even my father noticed my optimistic attitude and complimented it. After Janet and I made love, she made it clear that she expected a long-term commitment from me. Never shy about saying what she wanted, she expected us to get married and have kids a few years after that. Janet was obsessed with eventually becoming a good mother. She wanted to put her dysfunctional family in the rearview mirror and give her children the time, devotion, and love she always lacked. Despite the contrary advice from my sister Carrie, my father, and a number of my friends, I was determined to start working right away to support us. "You think you belong in the wrong place" was a common refrain from my family and friends, but because it was absolutely true, it fell on deaf ears. A month before the wedding, my best friend asked, "How do you think she earned those $2,000 for your wedding?" His words not only didn't make me think but also led to a fight after I hit him. I was deeply in love with Janet and therefore refused to believe anything bad about her. Nothing could change my mind. Janet's family, living in a trailer park, obviously couldn't pay for the wedding. But with the money she and I were earning from our part-time jobs, my dad's help, and the $2,000 windfall my friend mentioned, supposedly received from a mysterious distant family member, we had a small but pleasant ceremony and an unpretentious reception. I started working at the car dealership my father had an interest in the day we returned from our honeymoon. Janet started working at the bank. For 2 years, everything seemed to be going well. Janet seemed happy but not satisfied, she began making more and more comments about material things she wanted but which we couldn't afford with our relatively meager salaries. She often asked if my father, whom she considered rich because of his stake in the dealership, could help us more. I asked Janet about children, but she insisted that until we were in a great financial position, she wasn't going to do it. She planned to quit her job and devote all her time to children once we had them. Disaster struck nearly 2 years into our marriage when my father died of a heart attack at work. I was devastated. Since my mother died, he had been my rock. Carrie had just graduated from college and was living at home, job hunting. She also took our father's death hard, but she's much stronger than me. Janet supported me in the lead up to the funeral and in the days afterward. She didn't cry like Carrie and I did, but she was there for me. However, once the dust settled, she began asking more about my father's will and when it would be probated. This upset me, but she still insisted. About 2 weeks after his death, Janet, Carrie, my aunt, uncle, and I went to the probate reading. I think we were all surprised that Dad's share of the dealership was only 3%, and he had a second mortgage on the house. Apparently, he used the mortgage money to buy his share of the dealership. Ultimately, this meant that once his share was sold to the majority owner at a price we couldn't negotiate, and the mortgage was paid off, Carrie and I would each receive about $10,000. Although Janet didn't say anything, I could tell she was furious. That's where her compassion and support ended. After that, she became a different person. I tried my best to rekindle our relationship, but Janet was cold and uncaring. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be completely excluded. 3 months after the will was read, I returned home to our rented apartment and didn't find Janet but found a note above a stack of papers. "Hello, Alan, I want to have children, but you can't support them the way I want. I'm moving to greener pastures. I've withdrawn more than half the money from our Mealy bank account because I'm leaving all the furniture to you. Don't try to contact me, call my lawyer if you need anything. His name is listed on the divorce papers. Good luck, Janet." Yes, that's what was on the note, along with a stack of papers asking for a divorce based on irreconcilable differences. I guess that meant I wasn't the ticket to happiness she thought I was and therefore expendable. I tried to contact her, but her lawyer insisted she wasn't interested in talking to me. I was heartbroken because I really loved her. How could I not see that she never loved me? Luckily, Carrie still lived in the city and had a good job. Since I couldn't afford the apartment without Janet's income, I sold the furniture and moved in with her temporarily. Only Carrie kept me from being completely despondent. For the next few weeks, I drifted through life. Then, I found out from friends that Janet was living with a wealthy property developer and wearing maternity clothes. Now I was really upset. I called her lawyer again and demanded a meeting with Janet. "Actually, Mr. Easton, I was going to call you," Janet's lawyer told me. "Janet is pregnant and will amend her divorce petition to request child support." I was stunned again. I had just signed the papers for an uncontested divorce with a division of our finances that Janet had already arranged, no alimony. In any case, this was the moment when I became a different person. No more Mr. Nice Guy, I told myself as I attacked her lawyer. Tell that woman that if she asks for child support, I will immediately demand a paternity test and withdraw my consent to the divorce. I've heard there are several methods for determining paternity in the womb. If it turns out it's my child, then I'll pay for the test. If not, she'll pay for the test, and I'll file for divorce on the grounds of adultery and demand alimony and redistribution of our few assets. Got this? I shouted, throwing the phone down. I never received any formal paperwork asking for child support because I knew the baby wasn't mine. But now, any love I had for Janet was replaced by anger and hatred. When the divorce was final 2 months later, Carrie came home from work to find me drunk and talking incessantly. Although I was in a daze, I had never seen her so furious. She called me every name in the book and basically told me to be a man and be glad that the woman of easy virtue, as she now always called Janet, was out of my life. Then Carrie pushed me into the bedroom and slammed the door, shouting, "Don't come out until you sober up." I fell asleep wallowing in self-pity. I woke up to the smell of eggs and bacon cooking. Carrie was in the kitchen. I called both our workplaces and told them we wouldn't be there until noon, Carrie said, motioning for me to sit down, and then placing a plate of flavorful food in front of me. "Why?" I asked. "Because we're going to talk, and it's probably going to take a while for it to sink into your stupid head what you need to do." "That's why," Carrie said firmly. Within 2 hours, Carrie convinced me that I needed to move, at least a kilometer away, that I should at least get my associate's degree by attending community college at night, and that I should leave this behind. If I couldn't, I needed to seek professional help. A month later, I was on my way. I moved to an area where construction was booming, got a job as a laborer, rented an inexpensive apartment, and enrolled in the local community college, starting night classes. 2 months later, when my body finally adjusted to physical labor, I discovered that I actually enjoyed being in better shape than when I was playing soccer. I also realized that my high school teachers were right to be disappointed in my performance because of how well I did at community college. I realized I could become a star, even though I attended night school. I graduated with an associate degree in civil engineering and a bachelor's degree in business in just 2 school years and 2 summers. I wasn't really dating anyone. I was proud to put her out of my mind. 30 months after moving, I got a job as a manager at the same construction company where I worked as a laborer. I got to know the foreman very well, and then through him, the owner. They both thought I had talent. My salary was now 4 times what I was making when I moved, and I had saved quite a bit of money during this time. Since tuition at the local college was minimal, I decided to treat myself over the weekend after starting a new job with a girlfriend. I found an agency through a friend of mine who vouched for me to them and chose Desiree, apparently just her stage name. The price was high, but I was convinced that I really deserved it. When Desiree showed up at my apartment on Saturday at 8 p.m., she was twice as nicely in real life as she was in the photos. When Desiree walked through the door, she closed it behind her. We looked at each other carefully, saying only, "Hi, I'm Desiree," and "Hi, I'm Alan." Surprisingly, this did not cause the slightest awkwardness. Next to Janet, Desiree was the prettiest woman I had ever seen in person. She had a devilish look, large breasts, a slender body, and muscular thighs sticking out from under her miniskirt. Desiree obviously liked the muscles my handyman job and going to the gym once I started doing office work instead of most physical labor increased the size of my arms and chest. We made love, and then we fell asleep. When she started to move, which also woke me up, I looked at my watch. "Damn, Desiree," I said. "It's 2 a.m. You stayed here for 6 hours, but I only paid for 3. If you promise not to tell the agency, I'll stay the night. There's no way in hell I'm going home at this hour." It was probably the easiest decision I've ever made in my life. "Agreed," I blurted out. She kissed me and said, "I hope you didn't waste your money." About 10 times more was my answer. "However, there is a problem." "Oh yeah? What?" she answered. "We weren't careful last time," I said. "Crap," she exclaimed. "I'll be fired if they find out about this," she wailed. "Just don't be angry, but you don't have any diseases, do you?" I asked timidly. "I don't, and you?" she answered just as timidly. "Listen, let's both meet at the clinic on Monday and take the test. I'll pay for it." "Good idea," she replied. "If you pay for this, then if we don't have any diseases, I'll arrange a gift for you. How do you like it?" I smiled so wide it hurt. I was glad when Desiree showed up at the clinic on Monday. I wasn't sure she would do it. She gave me a quick kiss when she arrived, and after we got tested, the results came back immediately. We were clean. Other results would have taken 5 or 6 days. She gave me an email address where I could contact her with the results. Fortunately, we both did not have any illnesses. Since I haven't had a blood test in years, I also paid for it for both of us. "You must be one of the 2 healthiest people we've ever tested," the clinic director told me before emailing the results. I emailed the results to Desiree. She immediately emailed back, saying she was free Thursday night and asked what time she should come over to my house. As Desiree and I were getting dressed after breakfast on Friday morning, she kissed me goodbye. If we had met under different circumstances, we could have had a real relationship, she smiled. "I really believe that you are right. However, 2 nights with you are worth 10 years of pleasure with anyone else." "Thank you 1,000 times," I answered thoughtfully. She really liked it. She took a photo without clothes of herself out of her purse and handed it to me in memory of me. Sorry, but if you need me again, you'll have to contact the agency. I have an exclusive contract with them, she said. I understand, I said, kissing her one last time before we both walked out the door. My 2 happy nights with her gave rise to an unexpected problem. I started to remember Janet. I thought about how great my nightlife had been back then and how I had been treated as horribly as anyone else I had ever heard of. I was filled with anger and hatred again. When my friends told me I was being an idiot, I realized what the problem was. My sister Carrie told me I needed to see a psychiatrist. Going to a psychoanalyst helped. At least I was able to achieve a balance where I wasn't being a jerk to my friends and coworkers. After I saw the psychoanalyst 3 times in the first month and then about once a month for a year, he conducted an analysis. You have about as much anger and hatred as any sane patient I've ever had, Alan. I'm afraid that normal therapeutic procedures will not allow you to release them. Anger and hatred are bad for your health, although you haven't had any side effects so far, probably because you stay in great shape, Dr. Bennett told me, looking over his glasses. So, there's no hope that I'll ever get rid of this? I asked with obvious disappointment in my voice. Some catastrophic event will have to happen to put an end to this, through luck rather than counting. You will get rid of what you feel about Janet. I hope this happens soon. Does this mean it's all over between us? I asked, truly puzzled. It would be a waste of your money to continue visiting me every month. You are still my patient, but I recommend that you visit me every 6 to 9 months and call me if anything urgent arises. I want to see you completely healed because you're unlikely to have a fulfilling relationship if you don't. But there is nothing I can do with conventional therapy or medications. Thank you for your honesty, Dr. Bennett, I said, standing up and extending my hand. See you in 6 to 9 months if I don't have a crisis, I chuckled. Good luck, he said, smiling and shaking my hand. It had been 9 years since I left my hometown. When I had the opportunity to return, I was still a young man at 29, but I had progressed so far in my company that I was being considered for a new branch in my hometown. The only good thing about this would be the chance to see Carrie. I still had memories that were too painful, and although my anger and hatred did not dissipate, I controlled them. My boss insisted that I at least look for a location for a branch in my hometown, even if I ultimately refused to open a branch there. Since it would allow me to see Carrie in her homeland, and she and her husband Jeff came to visit me or meet me at some vacation spot every 6 months or so, and since I didn't necessarily have to go back, I agreed. When I spoke to Carrie, she insisted on giving me the latest on Janet so I wouldn't be surprised. When the real estate market crashed, Janet dumped the real estate guy the same way she dumped me. So much so that she was pregnant with her second daughter when she left him for a hedge fund manager. She was now Janet Jenkins. Surprisingly, she is still married to her third husband, hedge fund manager Kevin Jenkins, and was a stay-at-home mom with daughters aged 6 and 8. The eldest daughter was adopted by Kevin Jenkins, and the second was his biological daughter. I was actually glad Carrie told me about this for 2 reasons. I wasn't the only jerk that Janet dumped, and I hated the real estate guy for taking her from me. I rented a car at the airport. This was very strange since many physical improvements had been made here over the past 9 years. I went to look at some properties. I planned to meet Carrie and her husband Jeff at their house to stay the night until I found something suitable. I had driven no more than 30 kilometers, still 7 kilometers from the first object I had to look at when I got a flat tire. I called the rental company, and it would take them an hour to get someone to come to me, so I changed the tire myself. I forgot to pack the wrench with the rest of my gear, so I threw it on the floor in front of the front passenger seat and continued on my way. When I found myself at an intersection near a private school, I suddenly witnessed a truly shocking incident. 3 girls were about to get into the limousine when suddenly 3 intruders jumped out of a black SUV that had pulled up. They tried to steal them. Without thinking, I ran a red light and rammed the SUV to stop the criminals. A fight ensued, but I was able to protect the children. Luckily, the police and ambulance arrived soon after. The criminals were arrested, and the victims received the necessary medical care. Although the situation was extremely dangerous, I was happy that I was able to protect innocent children from bandits. After the ambulances had just left and I was giving my statement to the police lieutenant while the paramedic was finishing treating my wound, I heard the hysterical crying of a woman who ran toward the two little girls who had been kidnapped. As they screamed "Mommy," my eyes widened when I got a good look at her. Damn Janet. Janet saw me. After the initial shock, she ran up to me, screaming, "You're an idiot, Alan. I know you had something to do with this. I know you kidnapped my girls to take revenge on me, you piece of..." Before I or the cops could react, she lunged at me. I got out of the way, and the cop grabbed her. "This guy saved your children's lives, lady," the policeman shouted as he held her back. She didn't listen and continued to swear at me. In the distance, I saw the policeman finally calm her down and the little girls running towards her. As I got into the police car to finish giving my statement at the police station, having watched enough cop shows on TV, when I got to the station, I knew enough to insist that my statement be recorded on video. The main question the cops had was how I got hold of the wrench so quickly since my rental car was already in their impound lot. It was easy for them to check my history. After my statement, they asked me to stay a little longer, to which I agreed. "Can I call my sister?" Carrie was stunned and agreed to pick me up. I told the cops, "My sister will be here in half an hour, so I'm leaving." "We need you to stay a little longer," the lieutenant said. "I won't until you arrest me, and if you do, you'll be included in my lawsuit for unlawful arrest," I barked at him. He noticed the change in my behavior from friendly to hostile and did not insist. "However, I need one more thing," I told him. "I want an arrest warrant for the crazy woman who attacked me." "She was just a distraught mother," the lieutenant replied. "She attacked me, and I'm pressing charges. Either you give me a form to fill out, or I will go to the press tomorrow morning and ask them to ask the commissioner why you didn't take action against whoever attacked me." By the time I filled out the form, Carrie was already waiting for me. I took my suitcase from the cops. They had apparently searched it and left after Carrie gave me a big hug. Of course, the story of a thwarted private school kidnapping was the top story on the television news that night and the headline in the newspaper the next day. Luckily, the press couldn't find me because Carrie and I had different last names. However, it seemed that one reporter or another was talking to everyone else who had anything to do with the situation. The next day, I went to see a lawyer to sue Janet for libel and assault and see if he could verify that the police had arrested her for assault. He was very happy to help his new famous client. During the day, I went about my business. Everyone was talking about the situation, but no one recognized me, and I kept my mouth shut. That evening, everything changed. One television station acted quickly and obtained copies of commercial and street camera surveillance footage. Although apparently the school did not provide them with a copy of its footage, which was the clearest, they blew up a photograph of me recovering from a wound and said many complimentary things about my actions and bravery. It was difficult to conduct normal business that day as I was recognized, and people were dying to talk about the incident. The reporter got wind of my whereabouts, and soon they surrounded me too. I gave short interviews, downplaying my role. Somehow, Janet found my sister's number. I didn't think she knew my sister's last name. She called her home, looking to apologize for losing her temper and to thank me for saving her children and asked to meet. At least, that's what Carrie said Janet's voicemail message was. I never listened to it and told Carrie to delete it. I told Carrie that if Janet called and she answered, to tell her. The next day, before I left to go back to my office, I met with my new lawyer again. He had all the documents ready for my lawsuit against Janet for libel and assault. I read them, signed them, and paid my lawyer in advance. My lawyer also told me that he spoke with the prosecutor's office. He reminded them of how big the case was and asked about Janet being arrested and brought to justice. He was told they were looking into it and would get back to him. When I flew home, I was very pleased with myself. I'm ashamed to admit that it had more to do with the possibility of suing Janet and the fact that she now owes me a huge emotional debt than even saving the 3 little girls. Now, my anger and hatred had a healthy outlet. When I returned to my office and told my boss about the 2 great places I had found, he was pleased. Of course, news of my escapades was known in my city, and everyone around me congratulated me on my first day back. My boss, the owner of the company, and his wife took me to lunch at the nicest restaurant in town, where I again learned that I was a local celebrity. I enjoyed my 15 minutes of fame. When I returned to my office after lunch, I received a call. Mr. Easton, this is Bradley Simmons, said a pleasant voice on the other end of the line. Bradley Simmons is a billionaire entrepreneur and is considered one of the 25 richest people in America. Yes, and I'm sure you're calling me from the White House with the Pope and the Dalai Lama next to you, I chuckled. No, who is it really? I'm sorry to call you out of the blue, Mr. Easton, but one of the little girls you saved earlier this week is my granddaughter, Elsie. I'm calling to thank you and tell you the good news. If you're joking, then it's a cruel joke, I said. I assure you that this is not a joke, and after we talk, I will give you a way to confirm it, he said. As he spoke, I became convinced that it was indeed Bradley Simmons. I asked him to call me Alan, and he asked me to call him Brad. He was sincerely grateful to me and at one point said that his 8-year-old granddaughter Elsie was the apple of his eye. He mentioned that there likely would have been a ransom for her, but the kidnappers had a police record riddled with violent crimes. He ended our phone conversation with very good news. Alan, I am greatly indebted to you, and I am paying my debts. If you ever need my help, be it a job, a recommendation, a trip to Europe, whatever you want to call it, just call me, and it's yours. My secretary will email you my personal mobile phone number. I only ask that you don't give it to anyone else. Wow, that's really kind of you, Brad, and I can assure you that I will guard this with my life, I replied. And one more thing, don't worry about your rental car that you used to save my granddaughter's life. This has been taken care of. I was sure that I would have to pay for the rental car I had collected or that my insurance rates would go up, even if I only had to pay the deductible. I dialed the car rental company number Brad had given me and was shocked to learn that it was the president's office. When I told the secretary my name, I was immediately connected to her. Hello, Mr. Easton, this is Catherine Timms, president of XYZ. I want to personally tell you that we are very proud of what you have done. For the first time that I can remember, we are glad that one of our cars was totaled. I want to assure you that not only will you not be charged for anything related to the damage to your vehicle, but we will refund your rental fee to your credit card. I was stunned, and after muttering a few thank yous, I was forced to satisfy my curiosity. I didn't think Mr. Bradley Simmons had anything to do with this, I said. Timms laughed. In fact, Brad's holding company owns XYZ, and he was the one who brought your situation to my attention. Although, of course, I saw the video of your heroism on TV. However, even if you had not saved Brad's granddaughter, I assure you we would have done the same thing. Thank you, I replied. As I said, we are proud that you were able to use one of our vehicles to facilitate your heroism. Besides, our marketing department told everyone who would listen that it was one of our cars, she said, laughing even louder. We'll probably get 100 times the value of the car in free advertising. I had a very good week, I continued. Carrie told me that Janet kept calling her and sending her letters, which Carrie did not open but simply returned. Carrie finally answered the phone instead of leaving a message. Once she confirmed the caller ID was accurate, she screamed into the phone, "Stop contacting me, you. Alan will never, ever, ever contact you, except through his lawyers. If you call again, I'll have his lawyers file a harassment suit against your 5th place." Apparently, Janet didn't try to contact her after that. She repeatedly asked my lawyer to meet with me. He told her that everything would be done through formal proceedings. While I was enjoying pushing Janet, it was getting more and more expensive. I knew that I had to go to the deposition where I filed the claim, and my lawyer told me that Janet had a right to be present at the deposition. Although he could arrange for me to never have to talk to her. While I was wondering what date would be convenient for me to come to testify, my phone rang. "This is Mr. Simmons," my secretary exclaimed excitedly. Wow, I thought to myself, collecting my thoughts. "Hi, Brad, how are you doing?" I asked. "Great, Alan, what about you?" "Well, except for my lawsuit with my ex-wife, everything is great. Even this is great because I put pressure on her, but I don't like how much it costs. I have to go to the deposition, and I'm trying to set a time," I blurted out. "Really?" Brad said. Suddenly, I felt embarrassed. "Sorry, Brad, I didn't mean to put pressure on you. It's just that your call came right at the moment when I was looking at my schedule." "Well, Alan, then we have a little luck. I called to tell you that the mayor wants to throw a ceremony for you to be named City Hero of the Year. You could schedule it during your deposition and get reimbursed for travel, Brad said enthusiastically. I'm not a fan of advertising, Brad. I declined dozens of interview requests, including from 60 Minutes. But anyway, I can't believe the city will pay my travel expenses. Ha, good idea, Brad laughed. I have to be honest. I will pay your travel expenses, but because the ceremony is very important for my granddaughter Elsie, she insists on giving a public speech thanking you. I think it will be beneficial for her development and healing from her trauma, so I implore you to come, God, Brad. I really don't want to refuse you, but I'm afraid I don't like drawing attention to myself. I would be very uncomfortable, Brad interrupted me. I understand, Alan, but here's the thing. If you come, I will not only pay your travel expenses, but I will also cover the attorney's fees for your lawsuit against your ex-wife. I will double what I owe you, and I assure you, it's for your benefit. I pondered for a moment, probably longer than I should have, before Brad spoke again. Are you there, Alan? Sorry, Brad. I was just thinking. In fact, you've made it impossible to refuse. But you really don't have to pay my attorney fees. I'll come to the ceremony, but I insist on paying your attorney fees. I'm outraged at how she treated you. I didn't know you had filed a lawsuit, but now that I do, I want to help. My secretary will give you instructions to pass on to your lawyer, along with proposed dates for the ceremony. I look forward to meeting you, Alan, Brad said. Thank you, Brad, I answered happily. Life was getting better. My lawyer was the happiest man I'd ever spoken to when he called me and told me that Brad Simmons was covering the bill. His personal lawyer told me to give it my all and spare no expense within the framework of my ethical requirements. I'm sure my lawyer saw his bills simply double and had no doubt he'd be receiving them. The day before the ceremony, I had a deposition at my lawyer's office. As expected, Janet Jenkins was present. She tried to speak to me several times, and each time I acted very coldly. I covered my ears with my hands while my lawyer asked her not to speak to me. Finally, my lawyer said to the opposing counsel, if your client tries to speak to mine again, I will cease testifying, and you can explain to the judge why this should continue under these circumstances. Janet left the room in tears. I smiled broadly. The ceremony was awkward yet exciting. Meeting Brad in person was a highlight. His granddaughter Elsie's acceptance speech was the most adorable thing I'd ever seen, bringing tears to my eyes. Everything was perfect until the end. After the ceremony, I chatted with various people while holding my award. Just as I finished speaking with the mayor and turned to leave, standing behind me were Janet's second husband, and her current husband, Kevin Jenkins. I didn't even know they were there. I was so shocked that Janet blurted out, Alan, I really want to thank you for saving my girls. I cut her off sharply. Face to face with her, I lowered my voice and said, You, Janet. If I had known those were your children, I would never have saved them. Then I turned to leave. I was pleased with myself. Janet and Kevin had such shocked and saddened faces, making it clear they had heard my comment. Then I felt like crap. The fact that two innocent little girls, aged 6 and 9, had heard my hurtful remark, which wasn't even true but was meant to inflict maximum pain on Janet, really bothered me. I continued to think about it and how to make it right for 4 days until my lawyer called. 2 pieces of good news, he said. The court's decision and a settlement offer from the opposing counsel. Speak, I replied. The judge ruled that we can present evidence of Janet being unfaithful and pregnant with another man's child during our damages presentation. It's a significant advantage and weakens their position. Great, I said. As for the settlement offer, they were likely influenced by the court's ruling and your steadfast refusal to engage with Janet or her second and third husbands. They've offered $500,000 to dismiss the case with no admission of liability. If you drop the pending criminal assault complaint against Janet, they want your agreement. You wouldn't get that much in court, even with penalties, my lawyer said. My mind raced. I have a counteroffer, I said. I agreed to the amount and dropping the assault charge, but Janet must admit her comments were defamatory and untrue. I don't care about the assault admission, but most importantly, I want a 15-minute private meeting with her 2 daughters at the courthouse. Neither she nor her husbands can attend, only their lawyer. They must agree not to try speaking to me, and I want permission to communicate with the girls alone for 10 minutes every year until they turn 18. If they refuse any of these conditions or make any statements questioning my intentions toward the girls, we'll pursue legal action. I don't know what you're thinking, but okay. You're the boss, my lawyer grinned. 2 hours later, my lawyer called back. They've agreed to your terms and proposed a meeting date. Once I confirmed the meeting date, I called Brad on his cell phone. Brad, this is Alan Easton. You said I could call you on your cell phone. I hope I'm not bothering you. Alan, I'm doubly in your debt, so even if you were bothering me, which you're not, I'd still like to talk to you. By the way, my granddaughter had the most rewarding experience of her life at the ceremony and was very moved by the tears in your eyes. Thank you, Brad. She's just lovely, I laughed. I explained to Brad what I wanted to do at the meeting with Janet's girls. To facilitate this, Brad needed to transfer me $400,000, which I would return as soon as I received payment from Janet. Wow, you're an even better person than I thought, and I already thought highly of you, Brad answered sincerely. Of course I'll do it. My assistant will transfer the money to your trusted lawyer. Let him handle the paperwork. Thank you, Brad. We're even, I said. That doesn't even count as one of the 2 I owe you. And you better pay them both back, or I'll have to do something that will embarrass you, he chuckled. Janet and Kevin Jenkins watched anxiously as their lawyer escorted her 2 daughters, Elizabeth and Jamie Jenkins, ages 9 and 7, into an empty jury room at the courthouse. I smiled warmly as the girls entered, shook their hands, performed the magic trick I'd practiced for a week to calm them down, and then explained why I wanted to meet them. I wanted to tell you, straight to your faces, that I am so proud I was able to help you with those kidnappers. I know you heard me say something untrue to your mother, and I wanted to make things right, I said, sitting down and holding each of their hands with mine. Isn't that what you meant when you said you wouldn't have saved us if you knew who our mother was? Elizabeth asked with a slight smile. No, that's not what I meant. You two are precious, wonderful children, and whoever your parents are, I would be proud to help you anytime. However, I really don't like your mom for what she did to me in the past, and I said what I said just to hurt her for the way she hurt me. But I would give my life to save you too, I explained. Why don't you like our mother? Elizabeth asked, brushing back her beautiful light red hair that covered one of her sparkling blue eyes. That's not something I need to burden you with. You just need to know it has nothing to do with either of you, I answered as warmly as possible. After that, the conversation flowed easily, and time flew by. When the 15 minutes were up, I asked Janet's lawyer for 5 more minutes. He agreed. Girls, to show you how happy I am to have had the honor of helping you, I want to give each of you a gift. Mr. Ames, my lawyer here, has enough money in trust for both of you to pay for your college education, no matter what happens with your parents. If you ever need money for anything college-related, just call him, and he'll take care of it for you. Here are 2 of his business cards. Mr. Ames told me that college costs a lot of money, Elizabeth said, her eyes wide. Yes, it does. That's why I'm giving Mr. Ames money to make sure you two can make it, no matter what else happens. Both girls hugged and kissed me. And one more thing. Here are matching rings for us. I've already given one to your friend Elsie. This is to show that we have a bond that will last forever because I helped you, and you helped me, giving me more joy than I could ever imagine having the honor of helping you, I said. With that, I put a multicolored plastic ring on each of their right ring fingers, even though they were a little too big for them, and put another identical ring on the little finger of my right hand. They smiled, hugged, and kissed me again and left the room. Janet's lawyer was stunned. He nearly fell over when he looked at his copy of the trust agreements, which gave each of the girls $200,000 for their education, doubling in 10 years, with the remainder to be given to them upon graduation from college. I was a little nervous, so my lawyer and I sat in the jury room for another 5 minutes or so before getting up to leave. As we walked out, it was obvious that Janet's lawyer had explained to her and her husband what had happened. She was sobbing and on the verge of fainting. To any normal person, this would have meant she was shocked by my generosity and understood that, even though I hated her, I loved her children very much. Whether those were actually her emotions, I'll never know, because I just walked away with a little wave to Elizabeth and Jamie. Just after my 42nd birthday, I returned to my hometown. In the 12 years since I settled my claim with Janet, I have met with my therapist once a year. By now, he has stated that my hatred and anger towards Janet are completely under control. However, I still wasn't in a serious relationship. This worried my psychiatrist, but she had no other solution than the possibility of some random act that would help me overcome the last obstacle. I've been working for Brad Simmons on special projects for the past 11 years and have come very close to becoming a rich man myself. Brad was now insisting that I open a business for him in my hometown. Since I no longer had the concerns about seeing Janet that I had 12 years ago, I was actually looking forward to it, as I would be able to see much more of Carrie, Jeff, and my dear niece and nephew. As part of the process of starting a new business, I hired a PR firm. The person they assigned to me was a 21-year-old woman named Betsy Dentino. At first, I was skeptical that they would appoint someone so young and fresh out of college to the position. However, the president of the advertising firm assured me that she was the best person for the job and that he would replace her if I was unhappy. When I met Betsy, I was amazed. At first, she seemed familiar, but I soon realized I had probably never seen anyone like her before. She had to be the most beautiful woman I have ever seen in my life, including Janet and Desiree. She had long, flowing reddish blonde hair, sparkling cerulean eyes, an upturned nose, full lips, a figure that looked like it came straight off the cover of a Sports Illustrated swimsuit magazine, and the epitome of cheerful and friendly demeanor. Betsy was also a hard worker and had great ideas. I spent more time with her than I should have because I was just fascinated by her, but the end result was a great start for the company. Almost daily, I asked myself, why couldn't I have met someone like her when I was 21? Her habit of touching my hand when she laughed drove me crazy. When the 3-month contract with the advertising firm expired, it was a sad day for me. I wished I could keep her at work, but her company had other plans for her, and I really couldn't justify it if Brad ever asked me about it. When Betsy and I said goodbye in my office, she shook me to my core. Now that I don't work for you anymore, you could invite me to dinner in the theater, she said, looking into my eyes like a cobra. I muttered. I didn't really have a chance to fully respond when she hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "Call me." As she parted, she thrust a piece of paper with her cell phone number into my hand. I watched her as she walked away, her figure captivating me. That evening, I invited myself to Carrie's for dinner. The children were happy to see me and the gifts I bought them. "Stop spoiling them," Carrie chided as they ran around the house with their latest treasures from Uncle Al. After dinner, when Jeff was putting the children to bed, Carrie asked, "What's the matter?" "I know that look. Do you want to talk?" "Yes, I want to," was all I said as we walked into the living room hand in hand. Carrie was the only person on earth I trusted to be completely honest with me. Our love for each other was so deep that nothing could disturb it, allowing us to be honest. I told her about Betsy for the first time and even showed her a photograph. "I think I've seen this woman, but I can't remember where," she said with a mocking expression on her face. "Obviously, she's in the top 10 in terms of appearance, and her character matches her appearance," I intervened. Then I told her what Betsy had said to me and showed her the piece of paper with her phone number and a little heart on it. "Carrie, be honest. Is it possible this woman finds me attractive? I'm over 20 years older than her, and she could probably get almost any guy she wanted." Carrie looked at me intently, then answered seriously, "Alan, you look good, in great shape, and wealthy. It's possible. However, the chances are still less than 50-50. But it's worth a try. In fact, I would say if you don't try, you're a fool. Just don't get your hopes up too much, and keep your expectations realistic." I smiled every day, stood up, pulled Carrie to her feet, and gave her a big hug and kiss. "Carrie, you're the best. Thanks for the advice. I need to make a call." I walked out her front door to Carrie's roars of laughter as she closed the door behind me. When I went out with Betsy that Saturday night, I was nervous as hell. Within 5 minutes, though, she calmed me down with her smile, sparkling eyes, casual conversation, and touch, lots of touches. We had a great dinner. The conversation flowed as if we were old friends. She held my hand for most of the performance. When we were driving home, she asked, "Wouldn't we like to have a nightcap at your apartment?" Her gaze could melt steel. When we entered my apartment, she threw her shawl on a chair in the living room and found herself almost nose to nose with me, holding my tie. "If you don't reject me, we'll have an intim tonight and at least 3 more times. Then we'll see," she continued. My knees became weak and my face started to sweat. "If you're interested in this, it should be with a full understanding. I'm not going to be exclusive with you. At some point, I'll find someone my age that I want to marry and start a family with. No matter what happens, as soon as I get engaged, we'll never have a night again. But I hope we'll remain friends." "Agreed?" she asked rhetorically. I nodded my head. When we finally sat at my kitchen table eating the lunch I had quickly prepared, I felt like I was living in a dream rather than in reality. It seemed even more like an obsession when she spoke with her characteristic directness. "Alan, tell me, did you enjoy it enough with me to continue?" I laughed. "Sorry, Betsy, but that was probably the stupidest question I've ever been asked in my life." "Let me discuss my train of thought with you," I said, then pinched her lightly. "Why was that?" she giggled. "I wanted to make sure you were real and not a ghost," I giggled. Betsy stood up, laughing. "I'm getting dressed. If you don't call me tomorrow, I'll know that your answer is no," she laughed even louder. The next 14 months were the best of my life, although Betsy periodically reminded me that we were not exclusive and that if she ever got engaged, our relationship would end. She was the most loving, sparkling woman I had ever known, a real goddess. Betsy usually had dates on Fridays and Saturdays, and sometimes she went out of town for the weekend. We almost never talked about her other lovers. We went to dinners, plays, charity events, and even spent one 3-day weekend at the most expensive resort in the East. I felt so confident and happy with my life that I started dating too. I found several women ranging in age from 10 years younger than me to 5 years older whom I enjoyed being with. I never tried to compare them to Betsy because that would be grossly unfair to them. After one particularly memorable evening on a Thursday night, Betsy sat me down in bed and said, "We need to talk." "Okay," I said, holding her hands in mine and noticing for the first time the ring on her right little finger. It was too dark to see what it looked like. "You heard me mention Eric, and you met him once, right?" she asked. One Saturday night at a restaurant, I ran into Betsy and a cute blonde guy she introduced as Eric when I was on a date, and Betsy talked about him sometimes. I answered, knowing where this would lead. "Well, he asked me to marry him. I'm in love with him, and I intend to say yes to him on Monday," she said, looking into my eyes. "If you're in love with him, why didn't you immediately tell him yes?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "Because when I first started having an intimate relations with you, I told you that as soon as I get engaged, our relationship will end. I would like to spend my last weekend with you. I want to take you to the resort this weekend to say goodbye properly." "Wow," I replied, completely stunned. "That would be great, but you don't have to do it," I said, but she interrupted. "I will do it, and I have a lot of money. However, first, I need to fully open up to you, so don't say yes yet," she said. Then Betsy turned on the bedside lamp and put her little finger right in front of my face. The light from the lamp illuminated the multicolored plastic ring. My head was in turmoil when she said, "I'm Elizabeth Jenkins Destino." Destino is an Italian word meaning fate, and a nickname I use for business purposes only. I had never been so speechless in my life. My emotions took over my mind and body. All I could do was stare at her with my mouth wide open. She realized I couldn't talk, so she continued. "I never had the opportunity to properly thank you for saving my life and the life of my sister Jamie. I was shocked by what you did, not only saving me but giving me a $200,000 trust fund. I had to find out about you." I noticed a tear in each of her eyes, and mine were wet too. "When I was a teenager, I got a transcript of your testimony from your lawyer after I made him promise never to tell you. When I saw how my mother treated you, I was shocked and embarrassed. Then I decided never to be like her. Although she truly loved and continues to love me and put everything she had into raising me and my sister, I have never been able to look at her the same way since then, Betsy Elizabeth continued. Then Betsy said in a slightly choked voice, I decided to make amends for how badly you were treated. I discovered that you were a wonderful person and lover and continued to do so both for my own pleasure and as a constant thank you, and made sure that I would never confuse you in our long-term prospects. I finally spoke. You're incredible, was all I could mutter through what were now full-blown tears as I hugged her tightly. After a few seconds, Betsy pushed me away, wiped away my tears, and then said, Does this mean that you will go away with me this weekend and let me pay out of the over $300,000 I still have left from the trust fund you established for me? You gave me the greatest gift anyone could give, I told her after I had regained some composure. You gave so much of yourself that you turned my life upside down. There's no more hatred and anger in my heart, but only love and peace. It would be an honor to spend my last weekend with the most beautiful person in the world, inside and out. That Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning were the most bittersweet days of my life. Outwardly, I was not melancholic, although I had to admit that I was in love with Betsy. It's because I was so happy for her and grateful to her. True to her word, Betsy never had intimate intercourse with me again after she accepted Eric's marriage proposal, although we remained very good friends. She even introduced me to my fiancée, Grace, a widow 2 years younger than me who was the executive director of a charity that Betsy worked with. I didn't see the need to tell Grace anything about Janet because she was no longer a part of my life. Grace and I attended Betsy and Eric's wedding 9 months after Betsy accepted Eric's marriage proposal. Obviously, I knew that I would see Janet there, but since I no longer had hatred or anger in me, I had no fears. It was a beautiful ceremony and an amazing reception, and I was filled with joy for Betsy. At the reception, I could tell that Janet was avoiding me. I'm sure she was certain I would berate her again if she tried to talk to me. However, shortly before Grace and I left, I sought out Janet. She was shocked when I approached her because she had interrupted a conversation with one of her friends and was clearly preparing for trouble. Janet, I said, looking her straight in the eye and holding both of her hands, I must compliment you for raising the most wonderful woman in history. Elizabeth has no equal. I'm sure she could never have become the fantastic person she is without you as her loving mother. Good luck with that. I turned around and walked towards Grace, leaving Janet completely speechless and gaping. When I approached Grace, she said, I think Betsy's mother wanted to tell you something. She held out her hand as you left, and I think I saw her lips say, I'm sorry. What would she regret? I asked Grace quickly, leading her out of the ballroom. Maybe she thinks I didn't like the wedding cake. What do you think of our story today? I think that the girl in this video is wrong in her position and deserves to be punished, because cheating on her current boyfriend and being in a relationship with another is wrong. What is your opinion? Write in the comments. See you in the next video.